managing partner of the LaHood Norton Law Group, and George Araujo, scholar, former chemist, and pharmaceutical researcher and director. Today, well, we need to talk about the uproar surrounding Tucker Carlson and January 6th and videotapes, and it seems like there is no person left behind when it comes to who's complaining about them being released. Not Democrat, not Republican. This is the first time, I guess, there's been a little bit of unity. Everybody's upset that tapes are being released, and that's kind of odd to me. Because isn't it all about transparency? Isn't this what they originally had talked about? Everybody, we just need to be transparent, but don't show the video.
Well, you know, my pop taught me a lot of things growing up. But one of the things he used to always say is, talk is cheap, sons. Actions speak louder than words. Now, I didn't know it at the time. It was a biblical principle. You know, just do the word.
Yeah.
You know, don't just hear the word, do what it says. Or you're like looking in a mirror, seeing your reflection and walking away and forgetting what you look like. James 1:22. So with that being said, is well, all these people that say the right things and they have the sound bites that make them seem like they're a good public servant. Now you're being tested. I'm really during the week when I heard some of this backlash, I'd see the little pop-ups and people, so-and-so is complaining about this, and McConnell, which typical, and all these other people, and Schumer, of course. I was asking myself, why? Why wouldn't you want the videotapes released? I don't understand.
I know, there's no real reason.
And you have to ask, I mean, legitimate questions. I don't know if anybody pushed back and says, why don't you want these? I mean, Romney, you expect that from that fool. But I mean, why don't you want these tapes released? I mean, you can criticize Tucker, say he's cherry picking, fair enough. Criticize McCarthy, why did you release it just to Tucker? Fair enough. But it should be available to everybody, and everybody can do. What's the secret? I don't understand, but I know we'll get into it deeper. But in my humble opinion, it's because immediately there was a narrative. Now, look, let's make sure we say something. There was a lot of bad things that happened on January 6th, and nobody condones those. The people, anyone who broke a law, federal or state, should be held accountable. Period. End of story. But that concept, that idea, should be applied across the board through all the Antifa riots, through all the cities that were destroyed. I mean, if we're going to have one nation under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice, what's the last part? For all, it has to be implemented equally to everybody. And that's why Lady Justice wears a blindfold. And so these principles that we say we stand for should apply to everybody. I'd love to cross-examine those people that were bitching about it and ask what their beef is.
A lot of times on Facebook, some of the comments are, okay, you're talking about the Murdoch trial, or you're talking about China. What about us here in San Antonio? And there's a topic that has been weighing heavy on my mind for sure, and that is that the San Antonio City Council will be placing on the May ballot a proposed city charter that will do many things, like decriminalize marijuana, decriminalize abortion, and many other items, except one that just blew my mind because I think we've talked about it here before, and that is all of these smash and grabs that have been going on across the country where it's okay for if you steal up to $750 because nothing's going to happen to you. Well, that's on this charter. And I'm wondering if we can go down the line to say, what could happen if this passes?
Well, we don't have to figure it. We don't have to guess. We know it happens. So you just look at L.A., you look at San Francisco, you look at Baltimore, look at Atlanta, Detroit, New York now, Philadelphia. You can look at Portland. You can look around. I mean, you don't have to kind of wonder what's going to happen. This is a horrible idea. We can dissect. I know you're giving an overview of what we're going to talk about today. It's a horrible idea. This just shows the mindset and the set of ideas that our city council is heading towards, including the mayor. Elections are coming up in May. People need to ask questions. I mean, they spend more time, researching the watch they're going to buy or the car they're going to purchase versus voting for your city council, county commissioners, state representatives, state senators, things like this. We need to do this. This is more of a declaration of ideology. They're just taking an ideological stance because this is not really enforceable legally under the Texas Constitution and Texas laws and things of that nature. And so hopefully, the problem is we don't have a DA. We have a DA that believes in like this. That's the problem. And then we have a police department and sheriff and everything else that are weak, I guess. The question is, I don't want to push back on this. So this is not good. If this is the mindset that we're going in this community, I mean, this is we should preserve this city, and people need need to ask questions, need to vote, need to make their voices heard, of course, the proper way. I mean, you have to say that these days now, right? Because people take your words wrong. The proper way. We have a system in place, and we need to exercise our rights.
George, you've been quite silent.
He's just taking it all in, man.
I am. Heard it said that you can't. It's tough to learn when your mouth's open, right? So
Here, I'm
just trying to. Can you hear me? Okay.
Just a little bit. There you go.
There I am.
Yes.
Okay, look at that. I think that there are very serious human costs to getting human nature wrong. And I think as you look across human history, you'll see that pattern. We've spent a lot of time talking about how pretending that human sexuality, for instance, isn't what it is, right? We spent a lot of time talking about that movement in society. Well, that same delusion happens in criminality, doesn't it? When you pretend that human nature isn't what it is. And so when you look across, and Nico's completely correct. I mean, we don't have to sit here and wonder and pretend we don't know what we don't know. As you look across the country, particularly in cities that are run by Democrat DAs, you're going to see policies like decarceration and depolicing and deprosecution. And we've got lots and lots of data now over the last several years that where those policies abound, you see the city, society at large, they're descending into absolute chaos. Any policy that is trying to change human behavior but is completely dismissive of human nature is doomed to fail. That's what I was thinking about when you guys were talking. But and we see that pattern, and these folks are completely delusional. So we asked, Nico's question up front was really, I think, really poignant. What could be motivating, for instance, because this is related to Tucker Carlson very much so, because it's the same ideology. Why in the world, Nico, would they want him not to release all of the footage? It's over 40,000 hours of footage that he has been releasing. And when you look at this farce January 6th committee, it was based on a fraction of that. That's a fact, about 14,000 hours. So Kara and I were talking before the show, and I thought, whatever happened to this what's it called? Oh, that's right, due process. Whatever happened to that concept? And I think McCarthy's you and I have been chatting, he's been really impressive. I mean, he's been pushing back and saying, look, this is real straightforward. We got people right now who have been indicted. Some of them are still waiting trial from January 6th, if you can believe, a whole other subject. But he says it's appropriate for their attorneys to have access to the whole story so that they can mount a compelling and just case. That is, our entire system is based on that. I know this is your bailiwick, so I'll shut up and I'll let you talk. But that's really the premise, isn't it, behind opening all of this up before the American public. Due process. And so for Schumer and McConnell, I wish I could use stronger words on this radio. McConnell, who is just a piece of human dirt. Tom Tillis, Mitt Romney, give me a break. I can't believe that there isn't unity, Nico, around the wisdom of releasing these tapes. I get the security questions, but Tucker says that he went to the Capitol Police and said, look, please, look over these tapes that we're planning on releasing, and that he is not releasing without their consent. But there seems to be some disagreement about that. But anyway, I'll shut up there. Those are my
George very skillfully went from the city council charter to Tucker, which I think it was good. But I didn't want to interrupt him. He said something about the statement. He said, "We are getting human nature wrong." I think that caught my attention. He's right. We have this, and it reminded me, as I looked it up really quick, it reminded me of that quote. He has many quotes from James Madison. And he says, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither internal or external controls of government would be needed. And then he goes on to say more about government and the experiment of government and why it needs to be limited and why we need to give them rights. We need to give them authority over us, not them take authority. It's governed of the consent. We are consenting to be governed. What it translates to is we suck in the human nature, in our opinion, without God, and government sucks. And so both need to be determined. We need freedom, but yet with parameters. And so we're getting human nature wrong when you start going down this road that other cities and countries and district attorneys have gone down about this not penalizing. Think about the 750 mark, because I want to get into Tucker in a second and all that insanity around this stuff. But who's that going to affect? The mom and pop operations on the south side, east side, west side, even on the north side of everything. How many shops really, small business owners sell an item over $750? I mean,
right. That means anything goes.
Anything goes. And then and then criminal mischief, that means they can destroy your property over up to a certain amount. They can crap on your floor. They can do this. They can take stuff. They can break things if you don't give them what they want.
Nobody's coming.
Nobody's coming. And then graffiti. Graffiti used to be where everybody, when I was district attorney, everybody used to just gather around that. Hey, don't destroy my property. They were up to $2,500. That's a lot. I mean, so what? There should be. Look, you have a lot of things at your discretion. Pretrial diversion, which when I was district attorney, I implemented a full program of pretrial diversion that gives people opportunities for low-level offenses to turn their life around. And that's the truly restorative justice model that gets misused. We can talk about that all you want, Karen and George, but we do need to get into January 6th and people complaining and why. But then, more importantly for me, is how it affected people that are being accused of crimes and information the government has held back.
More with Sidebar coming up next. WOAI. This is Sidebar. You were in court this week, Nico, weren't you?
We always are.
Working. You got to talk about the law firm a little bit.
Well, we're set for trial every week now, especially since we talk about in the past COVID opened up, and I mean after the COVID lockdowns and all that stuff, which was insane that we shut down the courthouse. Never before ever in the history of the courthouse. And so that was something very new that no one was used to, and we knew that when things opened back up and people got back to normal, quote unquote, that it was going to be an avalanche. And so I feel blessed that we work with the people we work with. We have 7 lawyers in our office now with David Shear, a former assistant U.S. attorney for 27 years, former law enforcement, and then everybody else in our office. So 6 of the 7 of us were high-level prosecutors. And then Jasmine coming along, and she's already tried a lot of cases. She got recently past the bar. I think it was late last year, and she's been a blessing to our firm as well. She's bilingual and smart, and she brings class to the office. We're a bunch of idiots, and so it's
you said it.
Yeah, no, she does. And same with our staff. Look, we couldn't do anything without our paralegals and our front office staff, and our office manager and people that do everything. It's a team. When I tell our clients to come in, it's not just, you're not hiring 1 or 2 lawyers, you're hiring a team. And a team of people that understand it from both sides, from the government side, from the prosecutorial side, from the defense side. And then we actually care about our results. So it's a blessing. I learn from them every day, and it's a pleasure to work with them.
And George, when I said you were working this week, Nico, I didn't mean that you were not working this week.
I didn't talk too much this week.
I know. I didn't talk to either of you. So it has been a busy week.
I did work this week, by the way, as I work every week by God's grace, and it was very productive, thank goodness.
You didn't ruin your manicure at all?
Oh, no. Well, I didn't. You can't ruin what you don't have. Okay. So maybe I should are you telling me I should get a manicure?
No.
Indirect?
No,
okay.
It's very manly. I like it.
It was effective. I'll have to ask Steph what she thinks.
Okay, so let's start with Tucker Carlson. It's not weird. It's so funny. When you mentioned human sexuality, George, you said people are pretending that it is something that it isn't. And that made me think, and I don't want to start this as a topic, but when the White House joins, this widespread condemnation of Fox, and Tucker Carlson playing this, it made me think how sad it was that, yes, they're pretending that this is something that's horrible when it's actually just being transparent. And it made me go back. I'm being all crazy here, but it made me go back and think, well, how can we take serious a White House that's condemning a journalist for telling the truth, but that's the same White House that just awarded a man the International Women's Day Courage Award to a man.
That's correct.
And so how are we supposed to go forward as Americans when everything, sexuality, journalism, San Antonio City Council saying, okay, crime is okay. How do we navigate these waters?
Karen just vomited right there.
I know, it sounds crazy.
It's official. You should run for office.
No.
Well said. With the former venerable DA's permission, I'd like to weigh in real quickly, and I'll be quiet. I think that the reason I was laughing as you were saying that, out of respect, I wasn't trying to be demeaning in any way. So here's the connection. This is why I even brought up human sexuality, and I'll quickly get through that to this point. Contrary to the claim of activists, which we have a lot of activism around this whole January 6th thing. For instance, I'll just give you an example. The basic premise is that sex, for instance, is assigned at birth. Okay, that's a lie. It's a blatant lie. Everybody just says it, but it's a lie. You see, sex isn't assigned at birth, and that's why it can't be reassigned. Sex is a bodily reality that is recognized well before birth. It's a genetic component. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the idea that it's assigned and then we can reassign it is BS. The main narrative around January 6th, it is predominantly violent. It was this huge insurrective activity that left an infinite trail of broken bodies and busted property behind. And that sort of, it wasn't just the core, but really sort of the whole inertia around the gathering at the Capitol was violent, insurrective. And what's the adage? An assault on our democracy. Well, when was the first release of the clips? I think it was Monday.
I don't remember. Yes.
Yeah. Well, hello. You could see it right from the get-go, Karen. Unless I'm nuts, but you could clearly see these demonstrators en masse, non-violently, sort of milling about the Capitol, right alongside Capitol security staff and police officers. The initial bust-in, they busted windows, they broke open doors, but thereafter, hundreds, perhaps even thousands that followed, seemed largely clueless about the kind of damage that had just occurred, and they were just sort of milling around and
taking selfies.
And then police simply let them in, and you see police officers kind of walking alongside, and there was, like I said, milling around tables, and some were looking at literature on. So this is predominantly what you see in the video, and that just sort of debunks the narrative that you had this massive, violent, if not militaristic, assault on the Capitol. So that's where it kind of started, and then people were like, still waiting for that, that giant sort of attack on our democracy part to be clear. And so this is where Tucker Carlson's changed the narrative. He said, look, this is mostly peaceful, whereas this whole narrative this whole time was that it's mostly violent.
But he was clear also that there was bad things that happened and people should be prosecuted. I don't remember hearing him ever say.
Correct.
And I'm not here being a Tucker Carlson apologist. I'm just calling balls and strikes. I call balls and strikes when I support Bill Maher when he says something, even though I disagree with him on most ideological things. But when he says something right or whatever it is, I mean, I just want to we should call balls and strikes and quit being so tribalistic. Truth has to matter. Winston Churchill said that the most valuable thing in the world is the truth. And that's why it's often protected by a bed of lies.
Boy, was he right.
He was absolutely right. I mean, so Tucker's just trying to say, you should consider this also. You should consider this also in this. And I want to get to it at some point. I'll let you guys direct when to the criminal justice part of this and why and how this has affected people, because this is where, kind of my arena and how it affects everybody. This is the standard we're going to set. But there's 40,000 hours, from what I understand. I'm not saying this definitively, that most of it or a lot of it is just looking at a corner or looking at a door. And so you got to go through that. I mean, you can watch it if you want to, but there was a narrative that was quickly developed. And at the very least, and I'll get into actual case law, by the way, if we looked at this as a criminal case, which it actually is a criminal case for many people, there's cases like Brady v. Maryland and Giglio and other cases that talk about exculpatory evidence, meaning evidence that proves your innocence, impeachment evidence, meaning being able to question a witness and show that they're inconsistent, and mitigating evidence that means that there's evidence where maybe somebody did something, but not as bad as they are being accused of, so it will mitigate or lessen their punishment. And this is that, to me. This is a discovery process. Well, this should have been out from day one. This should have all been part of the January 6th hearing. There should have been allowed cross-examination on the January 6th hearing. There should have been other people with differing opinions on the January 6th hearing. I mean, that's part of what George brought up, due process. What does that mean? Fundamental fair play. Because then if you're in charge and you get to make the rules, if that's the prevailing idea, then guess what happens, Karen and George? Then the people in the crowd go, wait a minute. If those SOBs get to make the rules and their rules suck and I don't have a say-so, then I want to do anything I can to be the rule maker. And it becomes king of the mountain. And there's no order. And that's not the way our country was set up. And I don't think that's a way to run a society.
I am by no means a litigator that you are, Nico. But I ask the same fundamental question. If the January 6th Select Committee is correct, then the thesis is that we had a violent insurrection that was meant to break up the peaceful transfer of power and basically take by force control of the federal government in the name of Donald J. Trump, okay? That's the premise. That's the whole thesis behind that sham. And so when you look, everywhere you look, seriously, with the exception of where cops really aren't even there, when there's just an initial thrust into the Capitol, immediately thereafter, again, you see, it's bizarre to me that you have Capitol Police not only just stand aside,
they're moving the barricades, right?
But almost guide. They're kind of guiding these participants around the Capitol. So I guess what I'm saying is that seems like a very weird response if you actually have this violent insurrection happening. So, I mean, as you're mounting a defense, for instance, if you're a lawyer, because there are quite a few of these individuals who are still incarcerated, what do you think from the video? What jumps out at you as nothing's a silver bullet, but what do you think is perhaps the most potent piece of evidence? Or
against whom?
Against the narrative, against the January 6th Select Committee narrative that this was, in fact, a violent insurrection, and that every one of those participants was part of that violent insurrection.
And this is like a 2-hour response.
I'm sure it is. I'm just wondering if there's anything that stood out.
So this Shama dude with the buffalo hat. I mean, look, he's an interesting guy. Whatever his name is. I mean, he's got some mental health issues, from what I understand. He served in the Navy. There's things that he's dealing with. He's charged. I believe he was charged and ultimately convicted and pled to disrupting government proceeding and then criminal trespass.
4 years.
Right. But what proceeding did he interrupt if he's being escorted? I'm just saying this is part of that mitigating, impeaching, exculpatory evidence. If he's being escorted around by police, let's just look at that guy because he's the face of this now. I'll start
love
there.
This is what. Please continue.
Then at least as defense counsel, you would want to say, wait a minute. Okay, let's look at the statute. What is he being accused of? Here are the elements that they have to prove. And what evidence goes to mitigate, impeach, or show exculpatory, meaning innocence, of this guy? There's a video that I just saw yesterday where he looks at, I guess, at then President Trump's tweet saying, go home. Hey, guys, go home. Let's get out of here. He's yelling at the crowd. You can make out what he's saying. And then, yes, there's a video of him yelling or whatever. Look at that showmanship, I guess. I mean, maybe it's one of his mental issues that he's dealing with, or he's just fired up because he's wearing the hat. I don't know. It's not my style. But that's not a crime, yelling with a stupid hat on. And so you have to make these distinctions. And so this evidence of them showing him around, him praying in the Capitol, and when they let him in the chamber, him praying for the Capitol Police.
Excellent point. So why did the committee not show?
Well, you know that. I mean, because they're just trying to make a point. They don't care about the truth. So it's very misleading. The fact that 5 officers were killed by this, that's not true. That guy Sicknick or whatever his name was, he had a stroke later on. He wasn't hit by a fire extinguisher. Nobody was prosecuted for that because there's no evidence of it. If he was hit by a fire extinguisher, where are the headlines of somebody being charged with capital murder on a Capitol police officer? There was none. Well, why? Because he didn't die from a fire extinguisher being hit in the head. He had a helmet on, and he was walking around. He had a stroke. He did pass away, but not from that. And then officers that passed away, those 4, like they committed suicide. They died from other reasons. They didn't die from the event. It was very misleading, and context matters. And I think this brings the different context. That's all.
Since these videos have come out and we've all seen them, have we heard anything about them stopping with the forward motion to indict President Trump over this?
I don't think we're there yet. But I think it's becoming more and more inevitable. But who knows? We're not dealing with Democrats anymore. We're dealing with communists. The rule of law doesn't matter. And that's why I want to hear more from you, Nico, on why it should matter and how this pertains to people that are incarcerated right now.
Absolutely. We'll have more next. Show. If I didn't, please go to sidebartv.com, and that's where you can go and join us for Facebook Live after the show, during the show, and even on sidebartv.com, you can become a supporter of the show. It would be fantastic, since we have new cameramen and a video portion that has never been seen before, and I apologize for anything you saw before when I was trying to do it. So,
hey, man, we start.
so
look, I mean, for people to know, and Saulo and Dom
Yes.
and Jeff now have really taken the show up to another level
Yes.
in the sense of the quality of the sound for the after show.
Yes.
Kurt handles during the radio portion of it, of course, and then in the video. I mean, we had your cell phone and an iPad.
and I had to sit so close to y'all.
Twinkle and crooked, and you got your coffee breath all over us.
I know.
That's what. But it was fun. It was a good first start.
It was. We got started, and these guys have like taken it to a new level. Let's go back to, I want to talk about San Antonio City Council, and we're not going to forget about that because that's very important. But I do want to just continue talking about January 6th and Tucker Carlson and how he's being attacked, and people even saying that Fox News should agree to like take him off the air.
That was insane.
Who's saying that?
I don't know. Who said that?
They wanted his show canceled. I think it was McConnell.
McConnell.
I think it was
That's
Chuck
right.
Schumer and McConnell. And when people like that
That's ridiculous.
agree that much,
Yeah, they're on the same side.
follow the money. Show me a behavior, and I'll show you a reward system.
Yeah.
And Nico started this, and I thought we should sort of continue that line of questioning. What could possibly motivate these guys? These are our elected these are senators of the United States of America, for goodness sakes. They swore an oath to protect and preserve the Constitution of the United States by virtue of lawfully and duly fulfilling the responsibilities of their office. And somehow it's okay with people in jail right now. Somehow that's okay to not show additional footage, additional information that could enlighten an ongoing case.
Or affirm, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these are people's lives on the line. We're sitting here talking about Jacob Chansley. I wanted Nico to continue his thoughts on that because I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious. This guy, 4 years.
I know.
4 years in jail. And the footage it just clearly shows he doesn't have a cop next to him. For practical purposes, from a ratio perspective, it's 10-1, I think, in terms of the number of cops. They're walking along when they're guiding him throughout the Capitol.
Trying to open doors. They try to open doors for him, yeah.
Exactly. He comes into contact with even more officers. And then, he's way outnumbered by these guys. Where is the move? Where's the mad rush from these Capitol Police officers to arrest him and remove him from the premises? And then, like you said, Chansley later goes and thanks the officers in prayer on the Senate floor. How in the world does that attorney not make an issue now? And what impact do you think it could have?
Well, I've heard two. Just curious. We'll talk about that. I want to talk about that in a second because we're going to spend more time on that because I heard his lawyer that did the plea bargain. I heard him briefly. Again, I don't get to watch a lot of things. I get to see clips. And then I saw the lawyer that's representing him now, and the lawyer representing him now is really critical of the lawyer that set up the plea bargain. Just openly dogged him, which I use a little bit more discernment, but maybe he knows a lot more than I do, obviously. But when we started with Schumer McConnell, think about what they're asking. They want Fox News to remove Tucker Carlson and not give him a platform. You want to talk about an assault on democracy. You can't have free thought. You can't have free speech because you've gone against the narrative. Because we've, in my opinion, the sense I get, and I could be completely wrong, and I've never had a problem being wrong. It's almost like, man, you can't go against what we've invested into this narrative. You're going to screw up this investment. No, and why would anybody care? They should want was it better? What if CNN was releasing it? What if MSNBC was? What if the Young Turks were doing it? Or what if Rachel Maddow or whomever else was doing it? What if they brought back, what's that guy's, Brian Stelter or whatever that guy looks like, the guy, bald dude. What if they brought that fool back? And if he did it on a special show? Or Morning with Joe, and that guy's irritating. What if The View did it? How about them? Miserable ladies there. What if they did it? Would you still say the same thing? It doesn't matter. The truth is the truth is the truth. That's why Lady Justice wears a blindfold. And so this all should come out. And again, criticize Tucker on here cherry picking. Make a response. Do whatever you want to do. Criticize whoever you want to. You're entitled to your opinion too. But I just think it's unconscionable, and I think it's truly from a senator position. I'm not talking about from a salvific position because everything is forgivable biblically. But it's unforgivable as a United States senator to advocate for anybody, whether it's on a left-leaning show or a right-leaning show, unless you are promoting violence, outright violence, like Jane Fonda on The View, by the way, which you didn't bring that up, and that needs to be talked about. That nut job with purple hair was advocating murdering pro-life people, which is insane. She was given an opportunity to say, "You're joking, right?" Look at her face. That was an evil
I have
look on
not
her
seen
eyes.
that.
You should look at that. I mean,
will.
it's. I mean, even Joyless Behar was like, "You're joking, right? You're joking, right? You're joking," and she didn't say a damn word. And her face. So all I'm saying is, now, come against that. That's horrific verbiage. Whomever's saying that. But just because Tucker Carlson has video that the American people have a right to see, and he's showing it, then you're upset with that because he has a different opinion than the narrative. I just think that's unconscionable as a United States senator
And
for
it's
either
not,
side.
It's not like it can be chopped up and changed around. It's
Well, it
just
can be
plain-
chopped up. You just can't. It is what it is.
It is. It is what it is. You're right.
I mean,
Yeah, if you guys are listening, this isn't about fear-mongering
no.
at all. We're doing an analysis based on the facts, and we're trying to be responsibly cautious. What we are seeing incrementally, led by the United States government, is a slow sort of drip effect, the erosion of the rights that are protected under the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, individual liberties, due process, equal justice under the law. These are fundamental sort of supporting columns of our republic. No, we're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. If these things are eroded, then you're not watching this on TV anymore. You're watching this in your living room as it's happening to you. This is coming to you. If you think this is some far-off thing that we're sort of hyperventilating about, we're concerned about this because if this crap doesn't stop, it's going to come to you. This is a problem. This is communistic. It is authoritarian. This isn't new. That's the problem. This is old and tired and destructive. It's been happening for over a century in Europe and in other despotic countries. And we want it not to come here. That's why we're very concerned about this. Notice that Chuck Schumer and McConnell, this is what stuns me. They want him off the air, meaning Tucker Carlson. But notice that there hasn't been a single claim, not one single attack on the merits. They just simply want him off the air.
Yeah.
Okay? They haven't said anything that he's released is not factual. They haven't said he's wrong about anything. They haven't pointed to anything at all. And it's not just them. The U.S. Capitol Police Chief, Tom Manger, criticized Carlson for airing this surveillance video and said that it was, quote, filled with offensive and misleading conclusions about the January 6th attack. When he was asked, he had nothing to say. Okay, name one.
But let's make sure that we're not defending the January 6th incident. I mean, I'm defending people peacefully and lawfully gathering to air their grievances against the government. I mean, I don't see this backlash against Antifa or BLM or any other organization that actually caused billions of dollars of damage over the 2020 year, whatever it was, and a lot of deaths and businesses destroyed. And some communities, especially communities with ethnic differences, never recovered from it. Where's the outrage on that? So things that happened on January 6th were bad, and people should be held accountable for that. At least for me, I'll speak for myself. I want the truth to prevail. I want the right person to be accused and the right person to be held accountable. I want the government to produce all evidence because people have a right to due process, fundamental fair play, effective assistance of counsel, and you cannot be effective if you don't have all the evidence. It's like a doctor doing a surgery without all the bloods and the scans and the reports and the workup before they open you up. They're just going to take a chance and open you up? No, there's a lot of workup before the pre-op, before the operation. That's what I want. And when you have evidence here that, as for me, as a defense attorney, I would have wanted that evidence. I think it would have changed your plea bargaining for sure. It would have given your client options on saying, well, look, here's the statute. Here are the elements. This evidence kind of refutes that. Yeah, maybe you should or shouldn't have done this portion of that. But again, and that's why these cases like Brady v. Maryland, these are Supreme Court cases, Giglio, Supreme Court cases, talk about evidence by the government. has to be given over if it's exculpatory, shows you're innocent. Impeach, meaning to make the witness look not credible or lower their credibility. Or mitigate, meaning lessen your evidence. In state law, we have 3914 of the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, and the disciplinary rule 3.09 says you have to give over exculpatory evidence as a prosecutor. When I was district attorney, we created a unit, an ethical disclosure unit, where I had somebody specifically there to review evidence, and we just defaulted on the turn over everything. You're the government. You have all the resources of the federal or state government. Just turn it all over. If it's work product, say it's work product. You can do an in-camera inspection of a judge that can review that. But turn it over. Give person the right to counsel with their lawyer and to make decisions based off their liberty and their rights.
With what little videotape has been released of these 41,000 hours, is there enough evidence just looking at what we saw Tucker show? Is there anything in there that would say, okay, this guy does not belong in jail for 4 years? How long does that process take to get him out?
That's an appellate question. That's a Patrick and a David question. David Shearer being our former federal prosecutor in our office. I mean, there needs to be writ filing, some type of appellate process on the federal side that needs to take place, because you did not have a voluntary plea bargain. You did not voluntarily and consciously waive your right to trial and cross-examination and all this stuff because you didn't have all the evidence. The government withheld evidence. Now, the federal statutes and the federal system has not really caught up to many state systems. I mean, this is something that, look, there's a lot of good people that work in our justice system as prosecutors and as defense attorneys. And I've worked with federal prosecutors and people that do defend and prosecute. And this should not obviously affect everybody. I don't want to paint with a broad brush. We should everybody, prosecutors and defense attorneys should come together and say, this is not right. I don't care what political party you're in. This is our justice system. Lady Justice has to keep that blindfold on or we're all in trouble.
Can we hit on San Antonio coming up next just for a little while? We're going to talk about...
It's all related.
Yes, it is.
All related.
And it's all coming up next after this. And George, we're on the air, so remember.
Bleep me out. Kurt, bleep me out if I say something.
No, don't put it on his shoulders. Look at him. He's shaking over there.
Oh, I'm glad my mic was off.
No, what were y'all talking? I put my headphones on.
George was asking, we were talking about the Jane Fonda deal and with her nickname from, what was it?
Hanoi Jane.
Hanoi Jane, whatever.
Yes.
I mean, she's annoying Jane to me. I don't know if that's Hanoi Jane, but I was talking about, I was saying that she was making a point. She's entitled to her point. Joy Behar said, hey, what else should people do besides protest or vote or whatever? And then she says murder. And someone was talking when she said it. So one of the other hosts said, well, you're joking, right? Then Joy picked up on it and said, you're joking, right? You're joking. You just got to look at her. Make up your own mind. She sits there. She looks down. She looks up with this real sinister type look and has an opportunity to correct it. And she doesn't. Now, and so when George was laughing out, I said, okay, so everybody's pissed off that Will Smith, it always comes back to this, slapped Chris Rock. But it's true. That seems to be our moral compass in this country, is that everybody on the right, left, conservative, progressive, Christian, non-Christian, up, down, left, right, whatever, everyone said you should not have slapped Chris Rock over just words. That's what they said. You should not use violence. Or that became the kind of the narrative. You don't use violence over words. Okay. But then this no one's going to say anything about her advocating murder. I mean,
because she's on the correct side.
I mean, it's
She has the right
it's
views.
logically inconsistent, and I look for consistency from both sides.
But exactly. But this is very concerning because this is seeping into society in general. The sort of attitude that we see, where our own elected representatives are picking and choosing the narrative based on political expediency, not based on justice. This is an ideology. This is completely anti-American. This is fundamentally anti-America. This is not what this country was built on. This is not how we do business in America. And I want people to recognize that this is growing. This idea is, where is this coming from? This is an ideology. This is a world view.
Yeah, world view.
And that's why I said it's old, it's tired, it's been around a long time, and it's left a long, long, long trail of broken bodies behind. People have lost their lives under communism to the tune of over 120 million individuals in the 20th century. It's this ideology that takes us there. Okay? You have better line up with the narrative that power is behind, or you're screwed. Never mind whether you're right or wrong. Never mind where the evidence is. Never mind any of that stuff. If it deviates from the status quo, if it deviates from power, from the generally accepted status quo, which I've heard the term uniparty, and that's really what concerned me, this alliance between McConnell and Schumer over a half narrative. And I'm glad you keep saying that, Nico, because I think it's important. We are not advocating for the violence that happened on January 6th. There was violence on January 6th. No question about it.
100%.
Okay, but what we're saying is we're anti-partial narratives. That's the issue. We are for the whole truth, because human lives depend on this stuff. If it was your family member, how would you feel about it? If it was your kid, how would you feel about it? Jacob Chandley might seem like an inconsequential fool. He's wearing a buffalo horned helmet or hat, whatever the heck that thing is, and draped in a flag. You think, yeah, the guy's nuts. Fair enough. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But what if you show up in a 49ers hat in Philly? That's kind of a no-no.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. All right. Maybe somebody doesn't like that. I know it sounds ridiculous, but this is my point. You're censored and incarcerated and perhaps even killed in nations where partial narratives reign that align with power. And I'm just trying to press that. I think this is really it's sort of the important core of this, of why we care so much about this, Nico. It's not right because it hurts people.
Let's see, what's right? What's the definition of right? There's another. That's where I'm going to keep going back to him because I think he models it well. Someone like Bill Maher. Again, I don't agree with a lot of it.
That right,
but it's true though, right? I mean, because he wants conversations. He'll agree with people based off the idea, based off principles. Now, I would love to have a conversation with him and go deeper on his principles and ideas and what's the source of that.
But he always stood for being the left. That's why it makes such a difference. That's what he stood for in my mind.
He leaned left. I think he's more of a classical liberal. I don't know. He's got some pretty different ideas that I disagree with passionately. But I love that he encourages conversation. I love that he models. He's had people on his show that he disagrees with vehemently. I mean, I don't know if I said the word right, but passionately, he disagrees with these people. But then he has a professional, passionate, snarky at times, that's fine, conversation, but always ends respectfully, welcomes them back, and encourages more conversation. That's how you get to things, because you get to, instead of shutting each other down, you're actually talking. You can talk a little passionately. It's not violent or disrespectful, but you're talking still. And then the people listening get to go, man, Bill made a good point. Hey, Russell Brand made a good point. And he was funny about it, too. Did you see Russell Brand on Bill Maher? I think I sent that clip someone sent to me.
Seen that one.
You got to see that one.
It's a great clip.
He goes bananas. And he's a funny dude, man. I didn't like him for years. I just thought he was kind of corny or whatever.
Quirky, for sure.
He's just funny. You should see him on MSNBC also. That guy is witty. He's sharp. He's thoughtful. I mean, he's really kind of come into his own, and his maturation process has been interesting to watch as time has gone on. All that to say is you get to listen to Neil Tyson or somebody on the left or someone on the right listen, or a guy from the Young Turks, and say, you know what, I disagree with everything else you're saying, but you're actually right about that. And then you have some common ground, and then you can open up for more discussion. I just love debate. I love conversation. It's the way this country was set up. There's two ways to govern, as we've said on here before. It's through force or through persuasion. And the only way you can persuade someone, if you're allowed to talk and share ideas. And we set up this country to govern by persuasion. That's why we vote. We have a constitutional republic. We have representative government. We talk, we vote, we speak, we protest appropriately. We have our voices heard. We have free thought, free speech, and that's how we do it, not by force. That's the problem, and that's where we're going. Sorry, George.
No, I say the same thing just a little bit differently. We've moving from persuasion to power, where it's not about the force of ideas, but the force of the government, the state. And this is how a police state is created. It's created incrementally. It doesn't happen overnight. Right. And that's what concerns me. And you can see the two varied positions here from our elected representatives. Look at what McCarthy said. I pull up this quote. He said, quote, "I think the American public should actually see all that happened instead of a report that's written for a political basis." That's what he wrote. It was during
Tell me what's wrong with that.
During his first press conference. And he said it back in January when he had intimated that he was going to release this footage. And then here's McConnell. Quote, "It was a mistake, in my view, that for Fox News to depict this in a way that's completely at variance with what our chief law enforcement official here at the Capitol thinks." End of quote. And I wish I could use stronger terms again. I don't give a rat's ass what the chief law enforcement officer says. Because he's human, he's flawed, and like me, he has biases. And like me, sometimes he is overly influenced by those biases. I want to look at the evidence. I want to open up all of the evidence to anyone that matters.
That's right.
And deliberate based on that evidence, not on a partial narrative based on selective evidence.
We can't be. Look, if Schumer and McConnell were agreeing on an objective truth. And I love agreement. And I love when opposite sides agree. I want more unity around a bedrock of ideas that undergird our country, like life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, freedom, Constitution, and, in the Declaration. I mean, things that undergird our country. I want agreement on that: freedom, a strong border, strong military, entrepreneurship, freedom of speech, education. Exactly. I want agreement on all those things. And I want to agree to disagree on things, but still live together. I love that. I love these people coming together. It's not logical, and you have to ask yourself, to George's point earlier, why are they agreeing on this? Why don't they want people? I mean, if AOC was advocating and standing with McCarthy, hey, I disagree with everything this dude says, but I believe people should see everything. And Bernie Sanders, I would love that.
But you don't see it.
Well, of course not.
It's not coming.
Because of the tribalism, Karen.
Yes.
They just want to win. Nobody cares about the truth. They want to win. And I'll criticize the right on that too. I mean, so I've been pleasantly surprised by McCarthy. I was not a huge fan of his. I thought he was part of the problem.
I have to agree.
I mean, I'm very pleased with this type. I'm not saying I agree with it. Again, two things can be true at the same time. You can have bad things that happen at January 6th, but not what the narrative is saying. Those both can be true. And that's why with Brady and Giglio, these case law says, turn it all over, whether it's exculpatory, impeachment, or mitigating, because there's two things that can be true. Someone was killed, but maybe it was in self-defense or whatever. I'm just saying both can be true. Bad things happened on January 6th. But the narrative that was been pushed out is not accurate either. And so both of those can be true.
But when I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to just follow up on that because it's an important thought to look at what's true and what isn't. Should people have been inside the Capitol that day? No. Was it a exercise in mass insurrection and violence to overthrow duly elected government in favor of Donald J. Trump? No, it wasn't.
No.
So those things can be true. Brian Sicknick died. He didn't die that day. But yes, Officer Brian Sicknick,
and he
unfortunately,
wasn't hit in the head with an extinguisher.
Was he killed by a fire extinguisher hurled at him by a Trump supporter? No. Yeah. Jacob Chansley, should he, let's put it this way, was he a violent thug? This is what, the committee would lead you to think. What does Trump call it? The unselect committee. Was he a violent thug? No, he wasn't. Should he be charged for being inside the Capitol?
Maybe. It depends. I mean, I'm watching this video. My answer is turned, because I used to say, well, he shouldn't have been in there, so he should be. But maybe that's why this is so important. There was a guy on Bill Maher. I don't remember this guy's name. A guy it was a clip sent to me. People send me clips, and he was a bald-headed dude. And he says, if this nut job, he was using all this, inflammatory, walks into the Capitol, whatever, and you shoot him. You shoot him. Well, now we know he was walked in by the guys you want him to shoot. So you either said, man, I misspoke because I was going off of what I thought at the time. I retract your statement. People are not perfect. People make mistakes. You make statements based off false or incomplete information. That's fine. We're all human. But this is the narrative. Why is this okay for Jane Fonda murder? This person shoot these people. Look, I agree there's a time and a place for everything, Ecclesiastes 3. But this narrative influenced people's thoughts. And that's why, to your point, I think, George and Tucker's, here's more to consider. You make up your own damn mind. I'm not you. You make up your mind, but here's more information.
The blatant lies, though, is what kills me. Like when a White House spokesman says, this cost police officers' lives. It just makes me think, is everybody hearing that this is not true? And how do we make Americans understand that?
This is a police state approach. You keep saying a lie over and over and over again, and you marshal your institutions to do that, and eventually it becomes the truth.
Hey, guys, join us at the after show here on Facebook. If you want to continue the conversation, we'll continue. We'll talk more about the city council charter. We didn't get a chance to dive into it during the radio show. We'll continue to do that. Thank you for joining us this week. God bless you. Have a wonderful week.
I'm still not finished talking about January 6th.
So you don't have to.
And
keep
I
talking
do
about
have
it.
one more question before we start talking about San Antonio. When you both mention partial narratives, what does that mean?
It means you pick a portion of the story that suits something that you are predisposed to, something that you agree with.
So that
and
would be
everything
like the
else,
loop?
you know, we say in Christianity we call it cafeteria Christianity.
Yeah.
The parts of the Bible that you like, that sort of already line up with how you see the world. And anything that doesn't line up with how you see reality, you just sort of dismiss it. And human beings, as we say, have an infinite ability to rationalize that, you know. So
But
that's
so
what we're trying to get at here.
what I'm trying to get in my mind straight is when whoever put together that loop of people breaking the windows, jumping through the windows, you know, the guy with the buffalo hat or whatever, yelling. I mean, it was pretty much a loop, and it looked like that's all that was happening at the Capitol.
Context matters.
Yeah.
And so here's what I tell people. So let's say somebody walked into a room right here, and they saw me punch some guy. They was standing right behind this screen, and then they ran right out to Kurt and everybody else said, Nico just committed an assault on this dude. He just committed an assault on this dude. It was, well, hold on. If you would have walked in 10 seconds earlier or waited 10 seconds after, you would have seen that guy was threatening Karen. George told him to stand down and get away because you can't see because of the screen. He pulled a knife on George. George steps back. I walk up to him and smack him. Well, defensive third person, use of appropriate force. But, so you missed all that before. You couldn't see it because of the screen in your way. Context matters, and you didn't wait 10 seconds later to see the aftermath. So that's a partial narrative. So I always tell people, every murder involves a killing, but every killing is not a murder. Because if somebody breaks into your house and you shoot somebody, that's a killing, but that's not a murder.
Right.
You understand my point?
Right.
If somebody is about to assault you and I punch him, I hit him, but I didn't assault him. I just defended you.
So the Capitol police officer that shot the woman jumping through the window
That's a
in her
different
back.
one. Yeah, I think that's a justifiable shoot.
Really? She
I do.
wasn't armed?
From what I've seen. But there was a mob coming in. They were kicking the door. Part of that, she was actually getting through. He couldn't tell her, did she have a weapon? Did she not have a weapon? They were told not to go in. That's a portion of it. I mean, you're instructed, don't pass this. It's lodged. You have law enforcement on the other side. I mean, remember, the reason here in Texas, the reasonable belief of apparent danger and is it imminent? Reasonableness, apparent, not actual, and immediacy. So was it reasonable? You have a mob of people coming in. They've been told not to come in. They've locked the doors and they're breaking the windows. Was he in actual danger? Arguably, if that mob came in, he didn't know what was going to happen to him.
It seemed to me when I watched it that it was not that. It was them all going, him behind them and shooting her in the back as she goes in. It wasn't like that?
Nope,
Okay.
she was coming through. Yeah, she was coming through the window.
Talking
Okay.
about Ashley Babbitt.
Yeah, she was coming through the window.
What would lead you to conclude a different take? Like when you say you think that might have been a legitimate shoot, what would change your mind?
If she wasn't climbing through the window and if the window wasn't broken. If
Okay.
she was just standing there yelling, then I would say that wasn't a good shoot.
Okay.
I mean, in my opinion. And if there's more I'm missing, I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
That when that video came out, I said, it's unfortunate. It's terrible, but she's coming through a broken window and she wasn't supposed
But
to.
if she's
There's a mob behind her.
coming through a window, she's not armed. He can't.
He doesn't know that.
He doesn't know that. Okay, so is it incumbent upon him to warn her? Did he warn her?
No. The
Okay.
warning is it's locked. I'm sure there was a lot of verbal warnings. But the door's
Okay.
locked. You have police officers behind it. You know this is not a normal situation. You got people storming up the stairs, yelling and breaking shit.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. What's y'all's thoughts on the January 6th committee showing the footage of Senator Josh Hawley fleeing when they actually tampered the footage? It actually showed a lot of the congressional members all leaving at once, but they tweaked it and modified it to where it looked like he was running like a scaredy cat. What do y'all think about
I mean,
that?
that's just showing.
Well, he was following a directive of the Capitol police officers. I mean, they told him that.
But it was.
But you're right. It wasn't
No
just him.
accountability, no nothing. They could just
It's a
lie.
committee. Yeah, that's elections have consequences.
Well,
yeah.
this is why Carlson, he started the whole thing by calling Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney liars, and that they shouldn't be anywhere near political office.
Yeah.
He's completely correct. These people are dangerous. I mean, you really want them to
Can't have
represent
that, man.
American citizens when they're picking and choosing losers and winners
Can't have that.
on the basis of where they fall on a political spectrum, rather than something called the Bill of Rights. Rather than that, I mean, this is dangerous. People, we're playing with fire here. And I think the outrage is legitimate. So good for Tucker Carlson. Good for him for doing that.
And look, and just because someone says good for Tucker Carlson doesn't mean that you support everything he does. Or it does. This is
right.
This is the all or nothing approach that I think is stupid. I mean, like I said, I mean, how many times do I bring up Bill Maher? But if him and I sat down while he's smoking his joint, if I was ever on his podcast, we'd be sitting down talking. We'd probably disagree on a lot of different ideological positions, but we'd have a conversation about it. And maybe I would change his mind. He would not change mine because there's nothing that he has ever advocated that I have not considered in my assessment. Not that I've reached some stage or I've arrived. I have not arrived. I'll arrive when I'm standing before the Lord after he calls me off this earth. But I'm just saying that I've heard his arguments on different things. He's never said anything that's new to me. So all I'm saying is, but we have to have that conversation. And this is what's not happening today. We don't have a bedrock of agreement. Like truth has to matter, objective truth.
It has to matter.
It has to matter. And again, go back to Winston Churchill. It's the most valuable thing in the world.
Amen.
If we don't have truth, then we have this cherry picking narratives. Narratives aren't truth.
No.
Narrative is a narrative. It's not truth. The narrative in my example of Nico committed an assault in that room and the person running out after they were only in here for 5 seconds is not the truth. The truth was I protected you in my scenario from an assault and George from an aggravated assault because the guy pulled a knife on George. So I smacked him and knocked him out or whatever in my example. Well, that's not an assault, right? The assault was on you guys.
Right.
But the narrative was that I committed the assault, but the truth was something different. So truth has to matter, and that has to be a fundamental foundation.
I have to say, this idea that we don't support doesn't mean we support everything Tucker Carlson says and does. I mean, a classic example of this is, look, I'm generally strongly supportive of Donald Trump. I'm pretty critical of him on some things. I mean, like really critical. But generally, I've been very supportive, certainly supportive, very strongly supportive of his policies. I think we could. I see Tucker Carlson the same way, because what's also been disclosed over the last few days is in this litigation between Fox News and Dominion Systems. Fox News has turned over a bunch of internal communications, and some of them included communications from Tucker Carlson. But people say, well, he can't stand Donald Trump. It's not that he can't stand him. He explained why, and he was very, very specific. He couldn't stand the fact that Trump was making claims for which there was at least some circumstantial support. The idea that there was election fraud. Carlson supports that. He says, I believe there was. He goes, but Trump's legal team sucked.
Yeah.
And I have to.
I used to say that back then.
That was
Remember?
so horrible.
I said it back then. Go ahead, George.
I mean, I mean, how many times do we need to hear Sidney Powell saying she's going to bring the Kraken and never bring it?
Or
So
Giuliani's
Carlson just got fed up.
dripping.
He got fed up with it, and I think he declined doing interviews after a while. He said, he basically said, "F this. I'm not doing it anymore."
Yeah.
And so he was very, very critical of Trump, and he made it very, very clear about that. But is he critical about Trump in general? Is he critical about Trump's policies? Does that mean he wouldn't vote for Trump? No, he was adamantly critical about those things, and he should be, because Trump's legal team sucked nuts. They did. I mean, I that's a whole other discussion. But man, I remember us talking a lot about that at the time.
Yeah,
And
we
it's
did.
like, man, this is
It
getting-
was horrible.
I remember I said, what are you
Yes.
I mean, what a salacious claim, the Kraken. The only crack is when you're sitting on, talking out of your ass, and promising things you can't deliver. You can't do that.
It was horrible.
In opening statements of a trial, the one thing that we teach in trial advocacy is don't overpromise.
Yeah.
Because if a good litigant on the other side is going to say, remember all that crap they promised you? None of it came to fruition.
Yeah.
Why? Now, there might have been rules of evidence claims or rulings by the judge and things like that. But that's why you have to be very tactical on what you promise and what's going to come out before you're going to
And they
watch.
were
He's going to
so
be back in
eager.
office. And this,
Yeah.
I mean, and then what's the other guy's name? There was another guy, Lynn.
I
what was
don't
his name?
remember.
The other
but
lawyer.
Giuliani is who
No,
I
Giuliani. It was Sidney Powell, and then the other
Lynn
dude.
Wood?
Lynn Wood. Whatever happened to that?
Is that who
dude?
you're talking about?
Yeah,
Okay.
Lynn Wood. I mean, he's another dude. I mean, another guy that sounded great when he was making both of them sounded. Everybody's like, "Wow, that's crazy." What both? What do they what they have?
What evidence
And
do
then
they
everybody
have?
started QAnon this and that, and there's things working
It just
behind the scenes.
fell apart.
And I said, "Calm down, everybody. Let's just take things as they come up. Let's make assessments. Let's pursue truth. Let's see what happens as things develop." And you can speculate is one thing, speculation.
But don't have a press conference.
But don't say this is for sure going to happen and that, and I can't, and you're going to see, and this is the most, and all these hyperbolic, and Trump does this all the time. I don't like hyperbolic statements. Just say it the way things are. It just drives me insane, you know. But I think that was the criticism. If that's what you're saying, George,
It is.
then that's right. I heard that he hates Trump and all this other stuff. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Well,
He
you say
didn't have to like
context
Trump.
matters, and that's the context.
But he doesn't
was-
have to like Trump to like his policies.
Exactly.
Who cares?
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
Trump irritates the shit out of me.
I thought it was
But-
funny
but-
that
so
they brought
what?
it up.
Did you see his text messages?
Huh? No. What
Text
happened?
messages because of that lawsuit going on with Fox News or whatever.
Sure.
That Tucker Carlson's text leaked that he despises Trump. That was the
That's what it was. Yeah.
yeah, he despises him. So
Who said that?
Tucker said that in a text.
In context. And this is right around that time in the January 21, and that's when all that stuff was going on with bringing the crack
But
in.
usually when someone says I can't stand when he does this, but to say you despise someone, that you're making in my opinion, I mean, Tucker can clarify it if he wants to. It's his thoughts. But when you say, that's what you're saying, I can't stand when Karen does this, versus me saying, I can't stand Karen. It's a whole different
Right,
ballgame.
right.
You know what I'm saying? So I don't know.
I
mean,
get
that's
it.
just my 2
He
cents.
likes Trump's base, but he hates Trump.
Well, that's what someone's theory is, yeah. Maybe.
I don't want to start a new topic, but DeSantis is running, right? He's running.
I think it seems
He's
like he
running.
is.
Enlighten
How
us.
is he not?
Enlighten us, Karen. You seem
I
to know
mean,
something we don't.
he's starting the trail.
Well, he's got the
talking.
book.
Yeah, but
He's
if-
lost 20
I
pounds.
wonder if it's the book.
I
I
don't
wonder
know.
if it's the book
Man.
primarily.
Is he termed out? Did somebody figure that out? Can someone make a comment?
Oh,
I
I
heard
don't
that he's
know.
termed out.
2 terms?
I don't know. Is that how governorship in Florida is? Because here it's not.
Oh yeah, you can be forever.
Wait, I'm sorry.
No, I know that, but what I'm saying, I want to know if he's termed out. 'Cause someone said that he has no choice. That was part of their assessment. They said, well, because look what's going on.
Gubernatorial-
I don't have my phone
Check it out.
at
Check
all.
that. Gubernatorial terms in Florida.
So he lost weight.
He spoke
He's
in
doing this
Iowa or
tour.
something like
he's
that.
Speaking in Iowa.
Yeah,
He's doing the
that's so
tour.
crazy.
He's taking on national conversations. Blah 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 blah. I don't
Yeah.
know.
CPAC poll's been showing that his numbers are declining and Trump's are going up again.
Yeah, I don't know what that.
CPAC is typically
consecutive
Trump. Is going to be Trump
it?
anyway.
In
What?
Florida.
Really?
Okay.
Well, then, yeah. He's not going to have. I'll tell you this now. Knowing that, thank you for confirming that because I should have done it during the week like a dumbass. But now he is the most political. God, what's the word I wanted to look for? Kind of momentum, I guess. It's not the word I was looking for, but it'll come to me in a second. This is the most he's going to have. I mean, you're going to wait 4 years and then try to capitalization. Capitalize on. Is it going to happen in 4 more years?
It's a fair analysis.
Yeah,
if he's limited in terms and he's most viable now politically.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
man. This is it.
That's fair.
Wow.
That's
And
fair.
that's
So-
why
that's
Trump keeps on
unfortunate.
calling him names.
But still, don't call him name. This is what we
Right,
talked about 2 weeks ago. Trump just needs to go. The more this stuff comes out on the more this stuff comes out on Trump being right about how big tech was going after him, about Fauci. I mean, he wasn't. He was with Fauci for whatever. He got duped by Fauci, but about this or that, he needs to say, "See, I was right." Just talk about that. Look at my
Create a
policies when I was
united
there.
front,
Now he
right.
doesn't have to call people names. See, the first time he ran, I guess that was his move. That's whatever. It worked. Fine. You don't need to do that anymore. Stand on you have 4 years of policies and you have a track record. You have a report card. Brag about your report card. Do that. But brag about the fact that all this stuff is, well, he's not doing it.
But I
All this
want to
stuff
know
is
what he's
coming
going
up
to
now.
call Nikki Haley.
I don't know.
I wonder.
better watch
I wonder.
that one.
Oh, I
You better
know.
watch that one.
I know it's
Oh,
going to be
man.
so horrible, and you know he can't stop himself. That's just a fact. Want to talk about San Antonio?
Let us, because I think the issues are related.
I know this is something that we're going to talk about again because it's not until a May ballot. But if we don't start reminding everybody now, I mean, hopefully everybody that's watching right now, they're voters. But for the most part, San
Right.
Antonio is, it's so lame when it comes to voting. And not only that, but I think a lot of times the way things are worded on the ballot, it's very confusing. Even if you know in your mind and you've researched it, the way things are worded, you vote for something in order to vote against it and blah, blah, blah. So we're talking about this.
Would you share with us the 5 or 6 propositions?
Absolutely. Okay, so the charter amendment generally
Yes.
decriminalizes abortion, decriminalizes marijuana possession, and other reforms. But the ones that made me think, wow, this is exactly like other cities that it has had no success, and that would be all of these Class C misdemeanors. I would imagine they're just like going to get rid of them. And that is theft of property less than $750, theft of service less than $750, graffiti with damage less than $2,500, and criminal mischief with damage less than $750. So I'm not really sure how that could possibly help the city, especially with what we're seeing already. And if anybody doesn't think that there's not an increase in crime lately, I don't know.
This is absolutely horrific. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I mean, thankfully, there's no legal teeth to it. It's just all showmanship.
Because
and
just to be
political
clear, the
advantage.
city does not have the authority to override state law. Okay,
So
wanted
they're
to-
unenforceable, but they're still going to
But
happen.
this
So
tells
what
you-
happens?
But they can
right.
they can influence. Remember who the chief and who law enforcement technically works for. They work at the behest of city council and the city manager and all this other stuff. And city attorney gave that advice that this is not enforceable. He's right about that. But the problem is we have a DA that agrees with this crap. That's the problem. I mean, this creates a justice director. What the hell does that mean? A justice director.
Yeah.
The justice director is the DA. That's the justice director. And no matter if a law enforcement agency gets out of line, you have a district attorney that seeks justice, ensures justice is done. That means holds people accountable appropriately, make sure victims are heard from, make sure the citizen accused has due process, make sure exculpatory evidence and mitigating evidence, impeachment evidence is turned over so you can have effective assistance of counsel, make sure that they preserve and protect the Constitution. That's the oath that I took and that these people take. That's the justice director is the district attorney. And so we don't need some schmuck justice director from that doesn't who's that going to be? I'm curious who's qualified to do that job that they're going to put there. as
They're
number one.
going to appoint somebody.
And then they
It's-
want to
yeah.
mitigate, and none of them are qualified to even
Right.
to appoint somebody. None of them. Now, one person on city council. I'm sorry, brother. Ask the question. 'Cause I have one more point. Go ahead.
How do you see the justice director? Because you could see conflict coming, maybe, unless there's total alignment between the district attorney's office and this so-called justice director. I mean, I see this as the social justice model sort of formalized inside law enforcement.
But I don't even know what the job description is going to entail.
It says creating a City of San Antonio justice policy that would include a justice director appointed by council to opine on any city council vote affecting
Opine.
the city's justice policy
Right.
and analyze the justice impact of each city
What does that
department.
mean?
To
I don't
analyze
know.
it. What the hell do we need them to
No,
analyze
we
the
don't need
justice
that.
impact?
I know.
district
We have a
attorney.
whole infrastructure to do that.
Now, what they're going to do is they're going to tell, and then they want to mitigate racially discriminatory law enforcement practices.
Exactly.
What does that mean?
It's social
I don't understand
justice.
what that means. I mean, so we have a community where there's predominantly Hispanic. So proportionally, there should be more Hispanics committing crimes. Just in general, you have more Hispanics here. If you're in Houston, if you're in Dallas, if you're somewhere else, whatever, or Idaho. I mean, now, what I don't understand, we don't want discriminatory law enforcement practices at all. I want that blindfold that Lady Justice has to permeate the whole system, including law enforcement practices. Just because you're black, white, brown, whatever, if you broke a law, you get the same rights. You have the same rights. The Constitution applies to you. You have fundamental fair play. You know, I'm not going to create evidence against you. I'm going to treat you with respect. If you get out of line, you try to attack me, I'm going to defend myself, and I'm going to detain you. If you try to hurt a woman, you're going to be detained and you're going to be arrested and you're going to be prosecuted by the true justice director, the DA, who shouldn't give a crap about politics, who shouldn't give a crap about Democrat or Republican. The justice director, the district attorney, has an oath to ensure justice is done. What does that mean? To me, did we get it right? That's the way I used to describe it to people when I was DA. Did we get it right? Are we sending people to prison for possession of marijuana? Shouldn't happen. They should be given pretrial diversion, given courses, but held accountable still. Should we let a child molester that we know for sure after due process and they've been convicted get pretrial diversion? Well, no, of course not either. Okay, but in that process, you have to make sure that the citizen accused is given due process, fundamental fair play. All evidence is turned over to them. That they have effective assistance of counsel. They have a right to cross-examine the witnesses against them. And they have a judge that makes a ruling on evidence that's good. They have a jury that's as close to as unbiased or prejudiced as possible and wants to look at the facts. And that politics plays no role in this. It's a set of ideas. As we talked about last week, we have a moral compact. We have an agreement that this is our moral compass. This is our foundation, our moral foundation. Don't steal my stuff. Don't lie about me. Don't trick me and convince me to hand over my money to you. Don't commit murder. Don't sexually assault me. But also on the flip side of that, don't falsely accuse me of sexual assault. Don't falsely accuse me of murder. Don't falsely accuse me of theft. Don't falsely accuse me of misappropriation of fiduciary. I mean, right? Because there's a lot of innocent people that are falsely accused. That is a fact. 100%. If people think that innocent people don't get accused, you're wrong. Innocent people get accused. And then guilty people get rightfully accused but get inappropriately punished. Right? I mean, look at all those factors in law.
Yeah.
That is the balance of justice. Did we get it right? Is it metered justice? Is the punishment appropriate to the allegation? Is the process been preserved? That you had every right afforded to you? That you had a good counsel that was effective? That you got every bit of evidence to strategize and make an educated decision on what you should do for yourself? It all entails in that, Karen.
But when you say politics shouldn't be part of law enforcement, and you look at San Antonio, just San Antonio as the example, and you have a sheriff that is suing, or I don't even know what it is. What is he doing with DeSantis?
Turned over the case to the DA's office, I think.
Okay, and then you have a police chief who is blaming guns for...
Bring that up, please.
Well, I wish that I had
That
my
is
phone
so
with
stupid.
me. Please
On
tell
open
me
carry.
that.
I
On
could
open
not
carry.
believe. I mean, I guess I could believe it. I mean, that's a little just.
Well,
whatever.
and
I couldn't
the
believe
bottom
Bill
line...
did this. I couldn't believe Bill did. I couldn't believe.
I don't have the story in front of me, and I don't
Someone
even have...
sent it to me.
Talking about Bill McManus, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Chief McManus. I'm sorry. I worked with him. I know him, but I can't.
On
I
open
really
carry.
can't. I really can't believe he took that. I mean, there has to be something wrong. I can't believe that he's. I really can't.
Yeah, but that's
I wanna
politics.
Give him, but I want to give him the presumption of innocence, even though I've disagreed with some of the things he's done. I know the way that man thinks. At least he used to think a certain way, and I can't believe that he'd take the position. Like when I was DA, I wasn't for open carry. I'm not for open carry. I am passionately for Second Amendment rights. I am passionately for responsible gun ownership.
Mm-hmm.
I am passionate for being able to conceal carry. I think open carry is misguided, in my opinion, because if I'm the bad dude anyway, just practically, and I have intent to hurt people, and I look around, and I'll make my intentions known yet. I see the guy with the open carry, and what level of holster do you have? Is it level 1, 2, 3, 4? Could I go smack you and take your gun, and now I have your gun to use against other people? What retention training have you done to keep your gun and to defend yourself when someone says, that's a weapon, I want it because I want to use it against other people, or I just want to take it from you? Can you retain your weapon?
I get it. I get what you're saying now. I never thought about that.
I don't want anyone knowing that I'm carrying a gun.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to conceal. And then when you need it, God forbid you have it.
Here's what you're looking for.
Is that what it is? Oh, yeah, the current. Go figure.
So the rise of crime in Texas, he says, can be directly attributable to open carry laws.
What now,
Evidence?
What evidence of that is there, Bill? Come on, man, Chief. I mean, and Joe Gonzalez. I mean, you figure that, who said he's a gun owner and often carries firearm, told the crowd his office experienced a dramatic rise in gun violence around September. Yeah, when you took office. I mean, not because of open carry. This is his own. I mean, I'll read the article later.
It's okay.
But it's just ridiculous.
No, it's
I
complete
know,
bullshit.
but when you're
The point is, you're not
dealing
going to find any
with
evidence.
Joe Gonzalez, the DA, the mayor, the police chief, the sheriff, all
They
of
think
them.
the same. They all think the same.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's unfortunate. Look, it wasn't like that when I was in office. I worked with Chief McManus a lot. I even worked with Sheriff Salazar. He wasn't where he's at today. Javier wasn't. He at least didn't espouse these.
Somebody's pushing him.
Well, I mean, look, I think, and I say this as respectful as I can, because we used to spend more time with Javier. I don't think he's a bad man. I just don't. I know Bill. I don't think he's a bad man either. Chief McManus. I worked with Judge Wolf back then, Nelson Wolf. I don't think he's a bad man either. I mean, but we had wonderful conversations. Judge Sakai now, our county commissioner, he's a good man. I worked a lot with him on the family courts, and so I'm curious to see, and I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic how he's going to lead our county, because I know the way he thinks, and I've, at least in private, in conversations we've had and working with him on different projects. But this wasn't the narrative back then. Now Ron, Mayor of Nuremberg, he thought the way he did, but when you have other people that aren't really pushing along, I think he was very selective on what he espoused, because I would openly disagree with him. And you don't want a mayor and a DA
disagreeing on. You don't want that
Yeah.
battle every day. Neither side wants that if you can avoid it. Or chief and DA, or sheriff and DA, or you want unity, but not when it goes against certain principles that you know are not better for this community. And you should hash it out in a closed door discussion. Try your best not to publicly disagree. When you do it respectfully, but disagree. It's okay. You were put there for for a reason. Your reason is not their reason, and maybe they have a different way of accomplishing their goal. And we don't have that, and that's unfortunate.
We're not where Larry Krasner is in Philadelphia, but that's where we're going to head
I've
very
seen
soon,
the
where violent
pictures,
homicides
yes.
increased during every year of his term.
Of open carry.
And this is this goes back to our sort of opening thesis, the very top of the show, which is when you completely dismiss human nature and you build policies around that dismissal, you're going to have harsh consequences. And so what I'm seeing in the charter, based on what you said, is it's sort of the same old, isn't it, Karen? I mean, you've got this nonsense that is empowered by complicit DAs. And I hate to, that's right. Soros-backed DAs. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Every
And
single
you can
place.
see a trend here, whether you go to, right? I mean, whether you're in St. Louis, Missouri, or whether you're in, Dallas County, even Harris County. Atlanta. It's
Travis
exactly
County.
right. Philadelphia. We talked about George Gascon and LA
Portland.
here. Portland, my goodness sake, Portland. So there's this pattern, and they just simply will not look at a pattern. There's a restriction of prosecutions for certain offenses, and then they reduce the severity of punishments for cases that are prosecuted.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted you to weigh in on that.
Mm-hmm.
So what, in your view, because these guys are huge activists for decarceration.
These DAs you talked about?
Absolutely. Obviously, you're aware of the no cash bail, depolicing, decarceration, and deprosecution. So I guess what I'm wondering is, you know a lot about recidivism. What is the relationship? Is it thorny? Is it complex? Can we make generalizations from it between longer incarceration periods and recidivism rates?
They usually, I mean, obviously, when you have longer incarceration, you get institutionalized, and you don't learn to function in society. So you resort back to either what you did and when you were incarcerated, or when you came back before you were incarcerated. That's your last, point of acclimation, so to speak. So we had reentry programs when I was DA. We were working with the county commissioners and different people to you have to reentry. You have to get back into society and learn to be functional and give you a skill. And there's companies that will give you an opportunity. And I don't like to say ex-convicts. I can't stand that label. Formerly incarcerated. Yes, okay, you were formerly incarcerated, but now we need to reentry in society. As you know, we talk about Proverbs 23:7. You'll never live beyond what you believe. As a man thinks in his heart, so he is. Well, if you tell yourself, I'm a criminal, I'm a former this, I'm an ex-con, well, then what else are you going to do? You say, look, you're formerly incarcerated. That was your season in life. You've paid your debt back to society. Now reacclimate back to the community. You really want to change behavior? You change the way people think.
So I want to follow up on that, because when you and I we were sitting here talking about the Soros elected DAs, at that time we were talking about those relationships between incarceration and recidivism. At that time, I thought I recall talking about the United States Sentencing Commission, how they had released some data, and it seemed like there was a relationship between incarceration and recidivism. In other words, longer incarceration of more, let's say, five years or so, that you tended to see a lower recidivism rate, but not for violent crimes. So do you think there is that distinction, that if violent criminals tend to
Well, think about it. If you go into if you get incarcerated for violence, you're not going into a non-violent environment.
Right.
I mean, you're going into a more violent environment.
that mindset, that
and by the
behavior is gonna
way,
be propagated,
and to open carries and gun laws and gun, confiscation debates. What are the most violent environments in our country? They're prisons.
Oh, of course.
They're some of the most violent
Yes.
places. There's not one gun in a prison, but there's a toothbrush that's turned into a shank.
Yeah.
There's a wire hanger. There's a wire from your bedding. There's a can of soup in a sock or in a pillow casing. I mean, it's a violent. And there's fists. There's knees. There's eye gouging. There's all kinds of stuff. Very violent places.
Very interesting.
But there's no guns. So it's a heart transformation. You want to change someone's behavior. You change the way they think. It goes back to, as a man thinks in his heart, Proverbs 23:7. So he is. So when you see this change of people's mindsets, and you see the change of how they look at the world, through the lens they look at the world, you see a change in behavior. I always advocated when I was DA, we focus too much on behavioral modification instead of heart-mind transformation. You change the heart and the mind, you're going to change the behavior. And so these things are trying to do a decriminalize, de-prosecute, or de-whatever, de-institute. I mean, what does that mean? So then you're going to tell people, you want to tell everyone that 750, you can steal up to 750 and you will not be prosecuted. Just play that out for a second.
Well, how long do you think it'll stay at 750?
It'll go to 950.
Of course.
I mean,
don't you see the
graffiti? We're going to have a graffiti 25. It'll make that
this is important. This is what
Criminal
happens when you remove
mischief.
consequences. And this is why I think there's an analogy between what's happening in San Antonio and what we just discussed is happening in the federal government. There's this notion, you've got people at the lowest levels of society who are told that, don't worry, you can do whatever the hell you want to do, right? And unleash chaos in your society, there'll be no consequences. We have political elites that follow the same adage in their lives. That's what they're doing. There's no consequences. And this is an ideology that, yes, that's right, that's doing this deliberately to create as much chaos, as much disorder in society. This is why I keep coming back saying, look, we have a bunch of communists who are pretending to be the old Democrats. They're no longer Democrats. Nico's right. These aren't classical liberals. These aren't people that unify around the American experiment. These aren't people that have any respect for the Bill of Rights. These aren't people that don't love the Constitution. These people don't care at all about the Constitution. They want to do everything they possibly can to normalize anti-constitutional behavior. That's what I want to understand, that what's happening here at the grassroots, this is firmly entrenched in our federal government right now. So elections have consequences. They matter. Parental citizen involvement matters like it has never mattered before. Yeah. And that's really sort of our appeal, Nico, is that you always say we want people to think rationally, but we want people to do something with that. Do something constructive with that and push back.
Don't avoid conversations, guys. I mean, don't avoid conversations. Think about, if you're a prayerful person, pray about it, educate yourself. Think about how you would make your point. I mean, I can't stand the snarky, sarcastic. This is not a board game where you got your point or a competition. We all win when we learn how to disagree. We all win when we can share our thoughts. We all win when we have a safer community with more freedoms. That's when we all win. So I don't care about being right so much. I want to be effective. I want to change hearts and minds, but I want to welcome in the conversation. You know, George and I, we talk about a lot of things on R-Rated Christianity and on here and things of this nature. You got to learn to, and we got to learn to just talk, be logically consistent, try not to violate the law of non-contradiction. You can't be A and non-A at the same time. And reason with people. Give an apologia, right, a defense for your position. That's where apologetics comes from, the Greek word apologia. Give a defense for your position. If you're conservative, can you say, this is what conservatism means, and this is why I think it's best for the community as a whole. But part of conservatism is freedom. I mean, when I tell people you have a right to live your life, if you want to be transgender, if you want to live a homosexual lifestyle, I'm just saying don't try to indoctrinate my kid with it.
Or impose those beliefs on others. I mean,
if you don't want me to impose my Christian faith on you, fair enough. I think we can talk about principles that forget about labeling them Christian, but just principles in general and ideas.
And then talk about where they come from.
Yeah. We don't have to label them right away. You start labeling ideas and then right away they shut down the conversation.
No, yeah.
But if you don't want me to share my ideas with you in the school setting, then why should you be allowed to share your religious ideas, because that's a religion, your ideas on kids? How about just teach reading and writing and arithmetic and math and history and science and all of history? Don't hold it out. And just teach that. I don't want to teach. I don't want them. They don't need. Well, if we want to teach biology, tell them about the reproductive system. There's genitals and there's this and that. I get it. Penises, vaginas, cool. I mean, but don't talk about putting where they go and some of these books. Someone sent me a video on these books that are in these schools. Was that you that sent it, Jeff? But I mean, that was the video you sent. It wasn't a. I mean, it was. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, oral sex, very, very graphic. Whether it's heterosexual or homosexual, none of it's appropriate for kids.
Yeah,
it's just not appropriate. Why do we have in the old days PG-13, R-rated, X-rated movies? Because we're saying certain topics, certain language, forget about behavior, is not appropriate for this level of person.
That is so funny.
Get rid of all the ratings now. I mean, we're playing the game. What game are we playing then, if that's what we're going to do? How do we say what's appropriate or not appropriate? We're saying a 6-year-old can learn about oral sex and anal sex and vaginal sex and heterosexual and homosexual interaction. We can do that and forget about unicorns. We're going to talk about this type of stuff. But yeah, don't take them to an R-rated movie.
That's
stupid.
funny.
I mean, so it's not appropriate. Ratings were there for a reason. And it's up to the parent to make decisions on how they want to raise their child
and we acknowledge it's harder and harder and harder when you've institutionalized this resistance to the nuclear family and resistance to parental responsibility and then again it's not just these institutions, it's leaders. We've always seen leaders trying to avoid accountability. I get it, but I've never seen such a thrust in that direction than what we've seen during the Trump era with his opponents. I mean, I'm just thinking as Nico was talking, former FBI director, remember Andrew McCabe? That dude lied to federal prosecutors 4 times, no consequences. Former CIA director Jim Brennan lied under oath to Congress twice, no consequences. Former director of national intelligence James Clapper, excuse me, I meant the other, that was Brennan, who was a CIA director, and Clapper, who's director of national intelligence, lied also under oath to Congress, right? And then he boasted later or bragged later about providing the least untruthful answer. Okay, when you've got people at the highest levels of government, and Biden, please, that could fill 5 hours worth of this show.
Right.
When you have people at that level, these are our models, are they not? Are these not our role models? I mean, what do you point kids to? The President of the United States, right? And so I don't know. What's the recourse? The recourse is we own this. We own this American experiment. We have to take control of this. Right. You've got to take control of your family. You do. You have to pay attention to what's going on at home with your kids. If you're married, pay precious attention to that marriage. It's critical. It's essential. It's sacred, and we believe that as Christians. Yep. But boy, my goodness, caring for a marriage is going to go a long way to ensuring order in society. Can you imagine if everybody cared for their marriage, Karen, or everybody cared for their kids and actually was invested in and understanding what they're being taught in school? Society would change overnight. I don't give a shit what Jim Biden is doing, or what Jim Clapper did, or what Jim Brennan did. But this is the problem. It's seeping into society right now, and it's subsidized with tax dollars.
The church?
And the church is nowhere
as a whole
to be found.
I'm not talking about individual churches. There are some individual churches that are doing great work.
It's not having a deterrent effect, though. There's no
we got to move
resistance.
the needle, is what we're doing. We got to move the needle. So we got to engage conversations. We have to share our thoughts. We have to reason with people. We have to encourage healthy, spirited debates. We have to not worry about being called a name. Because the technique is name call you into silence, because people are just terrified of being called a name. I mean, let the truth speak for itself. Love on people.
It's true.
Show the love of Christ. Be bold. Be courageous. Be reasonable. Be compassionate. But that word I know has been hijacked. But I mean, truly be biblically compassionate. Love your neighbor. Who's my neighbor? Than the Good Samaritan parable is told. So you love people that society says not to love. We need that more in our society, and we need to model that. Raise up your child in the way they will go, and that when they get older, they will not depart from it. If you want your children raised a certain way under a set of ideas, then you have to take responsibility. You have to be engaged. You have to answer questions. You can't avoid topics. And nothing's off the table with our oldest daughter. Sorry, allergies. She can ask any question she wants to. I don't sugarcoat it. I pray for wisdom on how you talk to a 14-year-old, although 14-year-olds are exposed to everything that everybody else is today. She doesn't have these little butterfly ears. I mean, she hears things, and I share things with her, and she knows when I go on we do the R-rated show. Hey, Poppy, you were real passionate tonight. Yeah, thanks, sorry about that. Those words aren't appropriate for. She never hears me use the Lord's name in vain. Yeah, because she knows how precious that name is in our house, and she puts Christ first. I come second, and me and my wife come second to Christ in our home. We do our best to raise them up into biblical principles. We have them spar with ideas. We tell them why we believe, not just because the Bible says so. Why is the Bible authoritative and you can depend on it? Why can you depend on God's word? Why you can depend on Christ? Why God doesn't give you everything you want? we just reason things through them. It's an experiment. I don't know. She's not 18 yet. I get it. But she's 14. And we've dealt with 14 and 13 and 12-year-old stuff. And by God's grace and a lot of hard work and me and my wife being equally yoked, we're here. and we're preparing for the 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old stuff that George has been through with some of his daughters. And so that's called, this is the experiment in the laboratories in your house, the laboratories in your church, the laboratories in your conversations, the laboratory, as our pastor said last week, I thought it was good, in the mundane, in what you do every day in and out.
That's right.
What is the lifestyle you've created for your children? And do you model it? Are you a hypocrite? And you love on your spouse, your wife, or for a husband, or a woman, a husband if you're a wife, and understand why we believe what we believe. My daughter has a friend that he believes he's same-sex attracted, he's homosexual. I said, well, you love on him, and you don't let anybody pick on him, and you never compromise God's word if he asks you in front of him, but you never endorse or condone something that we know God doesn't endorse. But you love on him, and he's welcome in our home, and he's welcome around us, and you love him and pray for him, and you fellowship with him, and you sit with him, and that's all. What's wrong? I don't understand that. But you don't endorse something that God doesn't endorse. But you love it. To me, it's simple and not easy.
I love that.
It's just, and I don't know. We're not done. We're in the middle of the experiment. We're trying the best we can.
Listen to the language. Listen, it's a whole different view of life. The idea that that as I like to say, which I think the founders were guided by, that there's God exists. I'm not He.
Right.
And at some point, we're going to have to give an account for the things that we say and do at some point. And so that should have a restraint on how we view. And what we're seeing, this political movement, a key objective is to throw off any kind of religious shackles.
Oh, yeah.
I was considering a quote by Thomas Nagel, who is a well-known philosopher. He is an atheist, but he's very candid and he's honest. And so I like the things that he says. Here's a quote he says, and I think it can. I don't know if we should probably wrapping up here in a few minutes. But he says, he goes, look, I am strong, just him being honest, I'm strongly subject to the fear of religion, he says. I want atheism to be true. And I'm made very uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers. It isn't just that I don't believe in God and naturally hope that I'm right in my belief. It's that I hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that.
Wow. I'm fascinated.
A very influential philosopher, a great writer. I think that's really the core of the issue here. We can sort of just brush off any shackles. We can do whatever the hell we want. That's really what's at issue here, isn't it, Nico? It's the problems that started in the garden. Yeah. It's not that we got rid of God. It's that we replaced him with us.
That's right.
That's really what's at root here. So the ultimate solution, we believe, as Christians, is Christ. That's ultimately the solution. It's not just behavior modification, but it's soulish transformation. It's the transformation of the inner man by giving our lives over to Christ and adopting how he views the world. This is why we keep coming back to the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, because our founding fathers, and we've said many, many times, no, they were not devout, born-again believers. Some of them were Orthodox Christians. A lot of them were not. But all of them believed that the precepts and the principles in the Bible were effective for the flourishing of human society in America, and that, as such, built the country on those views. And so that's why we always appeal for people to come back to them, because we didn't get here by accident. This isn't parachute out of the sky. We got here by faithfully having processes and systems and people who embrace those things and live by them. If we throw those things overboard, the consequences are untold.
What a great point to end on, right, Karen?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Absolutely.
Dostoevsky said in Crime and Punishment, if there is no God, then everything is permitted. If there is no God, then Stalin and
then why not? Why
Hitler,
not anything? Yeah.
Why not anything? And then we've seen that in our society. The parameters are taken off. If there is no God, then everything is permitted. So, guys, thanks for joining us this weekend. We appreciate that. Hope you enjoyed the after show or whatever. Share it with someone you think might benefit from it. And have a blessed week. God willing, we'll see you next weekend.